Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
Most times the police come into the black community, it's never to serve. It's always to arrest or to apprehend or to kill. And I mean, these are strong words, but they're factual.
And things like this do occur in any community, whether it's Baton Rouge or somewhere in the east or the north. I think that you'll find that relationships will become strained to a degree. But I think it's the obligation of everyone, the police chief, the community leaders, whether they're black or white, to do what's in the best interest of the community. And that's all we've ever done.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Hinton.
And I'm Genevieve Stewart. Is the relationship between the black community and local police departments deteriorating? And if so, what can be done to improve that relationship?
These are just a couple of the questions we'll put to black leaders, lawmakers, and law enforcement officials as we examine the relationship between the black community and the police today on Folks.
Everybody's just folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks to live, folks got to give, folks got to care, ooh, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of all, ooh, touches us all. To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Confrontations between the police and the black community oftentimes make national headlines. Just think back to December of last year. The city, Miami, Florida. A black man was shot and killed by a white police officer. The incident led to 2 days of rioting. But we don't have to travel that far to find such incidents and headlines. Recently, the police in New Orleans got more national attention than they bargained for. The media called the case the trial of the Algiers Seven. 7 white New Orleans police officers accused of violating the civil rights of 4 men from New Orleans' Algiers area: Irvin Hughes, Clarence Green, Johnny Lee Brownlee, and Robert Davis. Police had picked up the men for questioning in connection with the November 1980 slaying of Patrolman Gregory Newport. One of the government's witnesses in the trial, which was moved to Dallas, was Oris Buckner, a black officer. Buckner admitted he participated in the beating of Robert Davis. Buckner, who was granted immunity from prosecution, also testified that he saw 3 of the 7 officers on trial strike Davis in the stomach. After listening to testimony for almost 2 weeks, the jury found 3 of the 7 officers guilty and acquitted the other 4. The 3 officers convicted in the Algiers 7 trial will be sentenced in mid-May. They each face a maximum sentence of up to 11 years in prison and a fine of up to $11,000. Genevieve?
You know, Rob, here in Baton Rouge, the relationship between the black community and the police department is also strained. The scenario here also involves a black man and a white officer. The scenes you see here were videotaped on January 24th of this year, following the fatal shooting of 31-year-old E. Jane Mincer, a black man, by a Baton Rouge police officer. This is Ernest Rhodes, the officer who was charged with negligent homicide in connection with the Mincer shooting.
I thought that he was trying to disarm me still. Of course, his actions never preclude the fact that he couldn't have had a weapon. I didn't know whether he did or did not. But the fact that an unarmed man, sir, I can assure you, can kill you in a minute.
Despite the Rhodes indictment, the incident has caused quite a stir among blacks in Baton Rouge. How would you describe the relationship between the police department and the black community?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know just what the inner circle police department is, but from experience, most times the police come into the black community, it's never to serve. It's always to arrest or to apprehend or to kill. And I mean, these are strong words, but they're factual. You don't see white police officers helping little old black ladies cross the street. You see them putting them in jail or coming to get their sons or their daughters. And this is the problem that we have.
I think at a given time we can say that certainly the relationship is good. It's better. I'm often stopped by people from the black community that I don't know, coming out of stores or hospitals, and they just say, you know, want to meet me and introduce themselves and just say, we think that the police are doing a good job. I think that certainly if we had to check the yardstick, you would find that there are some complaints, and there will always be some complaints. How we fit in that scale of good, bad, in between, I think we're doing realistically good, realistically well. I think that depending on the circumstances, it could be better, but I think that most citizens in this community, whether they're from the black community or the white community, they just want good law enforcement and they want a good, safe place to live.
Do you feel that the recent shooting in Baton Rouge has deteriorated the relationship between the police department and the black community?
Well, not deteriorated, because we've always tried to establish some type of dialogue with the police, but every time we do, something like this happen, you know, and we go back to square one. So now we back to square one. We back to the slave mentality that if a black man don't obey, you know, you dispose of him. You know, they used to say a long time ago that whenever you kill a black man, that is less you have to contend with, you know. So it's almost like, I don't know what you would call it, I guess, exterminating us, you know. But what we try to do, we try to encourage young black men to get on the police department. But every time we think that we may have a so-called applicant to fall into the scope of things and want to be employed, something like this happen. And then the first thing that they tell us as an organization, man, I don't want to deal with them. You know, I don't want to be a part of that. So this is a problem that we have. Until we are able to get black men in toto to get involved in police work, then we can always have the problem of white men coming in the community, either destroying something or creating a problem, because you cannot expect them to respect you, because that is not taught from the time they are children up, that you should respect black folk as you to respect white.
I think that the relationships have been strained recently. I think that it's been, and some of the reasons have been because there's been a misunderstanding about law enforcement in general. And we had an incident, as you know, that recently transpired where a black person lost his life and a police officer was involved. But I think what we need to understand is, and I think this is where the issue was clouded, is that we should look at that specific issue and instance and not make a total and complete indictment of the entire community, the total and complete indictment of the police department. I think is, in the issue at point was whether or not a police officer acted properly in a given instance. So when things like this do occur in any community, whether it's Baton Rouge or somewhere in the east or the north, I think that you'll find that relationships will become strained to a degree. But I think it's the obligation of everyone, the police chief, the community leaders, whether they're black or white, to do what's in the best interest of the community. And that's all we've ever done.
Rob, I asked Eames if he felt his assessment of the police department was a fair one. And he said yes, that he felt that it was a very fair assessment because his only means of comparison was this, that according to his knowledge, a black police officer has never unnecessarily accosted, assaulted, or shot at a white citizen without provocation.
You know, Genevieve, one of the first groups to cry out about the Mincer shooting here in Baton Rouge was the Louisiana Political Action Council. Willis Reed is the leader of that group, and he says he would like federal officials to investigate that fatal shooting.
I'm not, I don't have very much hopes or faith, rather, that anything going to come out from a local level. I think that it's the whole thing is conducted by the power structure. And seldom will a power structure interfere with another department or rule against the other department if any way it's possible to get around it. However, we feel that the entire police department in Baton Rouge should be changed. I think it should be taken from under the jurisdiction of the mayor president. Mayor president. I don't think the mayor should have anything to do with the police department. I don't think he should have the authorities to appoint the chief with all well and good if the intention is too big a job for any one man to do.
How would you describe the relationship between the black community and the police department here in Baton Rouge?
I feel that the relationship with the police department and the black community was rather low before the shooting. And now it's about down to zero or less than zero. In spite of the fact there are some very good people on the police department, both white and black, men and women. But the police department are run in such a way, and they're allowing a handful or a certain percent of those on the police department, usually it seems though for political purposes, and their conduct, which we feel that's unbecoming, and the way they treat the citizen of the community. They have no faith in them now.
Do you feel by promoting blacks within the department would improve the situation between the community and the police department?
No. That's not going to never solve your problem. What will solve the problem with the police department, anything else, when the citizen realize that there are 24 hours in a day. And of that 24 hours they are supposed to take part to earn a living for themselves and their families. Part of that 24 hours is a fellowship with their families. And 24 hours, of that 24 hours, they're supposed to give some of that service back to that community to see that that community is run right for the benefit of all the people. Now, when people get a little job and a nice little car and get a little home and think they're pretty well safe and wants to leave running the city entirely to someone else and don't have time to get involved in the civic activity, then you're not going to have your problem solved. People are going to take advantage of it. You can put all black down there if you want to, and then just leave them there and see what's going to happen. You probably have the same trouble. If you put all Jews down there, if you put all Frenchmen down there, you put all Italians down there and let them run it. People living in a community must realize that they owe something to their community to see that it's run right. And an individual who don't have any time to contribute to that community affairs, they ought to move out. They're not entitled to the benefits that an organized community offer.
Joining us in the studio today are State Representative Joe Delpit of Baton Rouge and Major Reginald Brown of the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. Gentlemen, welcome to Folks. Joe, let me begin with you. How would you describe the relationship between the black community and the police department?
Well, it depends on how you evaluate that. Naturally, I think the police department overall has done a very effective job in Baton Rouge. Now, if you would take the incident that happened here recently with the shooting of E. Jane Mincer, and if a poll was taken that day in the black community, I think that the black community would say quickly that the rating would be 0 to 1 on a scale of 10, 1 out of 10. So it depends. I've seen some great things. We have some great police officers in Baton Rouge, very dedicated men and women that work. But there are some who work in the department, in my opinion, should be taken out. And there are ways that they shouldn't get in there in the first place if they would deal with it, and that's psychological testing and other type of tools that they could use in order to get people out before they get in.
Well, it's been several months since that fatal shooting occurred. Would you say that the relationship between the black community and the police department here in Baton Rouge is still somewhat strained?
No, I think it's very much strained. Nothing changed that quick. It's like a sore. You know, it takes time to heal. And unfortunately, the police department is not helping in this situation. In the black community, if a criminal go out there and commit a crime, we don't stand up and uphold his activities once we know that that person is guilty of something, or we suspect them of being guilty of something. We will denounce them if necessary. Unfortunately, when a police officer commit a crime, and I'm saying allegedly so because I can only go by what a group of his own peers, in this particular case of Mr. Rhodes, have chosen to say that this man is guilty of a crime. Now, they have said that, and they are persons of his own peers. These are people who live in this community. And now it goes to the judicial process where the courts would have that opportunity to make the final determination. But there was enough evidence to say that he was wrong. But do you have the policemen who work with him and their organizations coming out and saying, hey, that guy is wrong? And this causes the black community to look at the overall department and judge the overall department because they're defending him. But if they would come out and say, hey, this guy know that he was wrong. The police chief wrote a letter saying that he was wrong. He used the improper procedure. They went to some board, and they, naturally, as you know, the outcome of that, they appealed it, and the police chief appealed it. The board did not hear but one side of that case, just the side that was presented by Mr. Rhodes. They did not go out and get the evidence as was presented by the witnesses. So therefore, if they would do the same thing that they expect us to do, to stand up, be leaders, be counted, stand up and say, now, you know that's not the whole police department doing this. That's one incident. But if they would come out themselves as policemen, I think people would have more respect for them as officers and their organizations that they are part of.
Reggie, just regarding the Mincer incident, as a black law enforcement officer, how would you describe that relationship between the community and the black community and the police department?
Rob, I describe it as an unfortunate situation as far as law enforcement is concerned. Certainly, we in law enforcement hate to see mistakes or accidents or unfortunate situations of this nature take place, regardless of what color the officer is who's involved, because we have a reputation and credentials to protect. And this is giving us a setback.
Joe, to your knowledge, has the black community made any specific requests of the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department in order to improve relationships between the two?
Well, we have not had too many complaints with the Sheriff's Department, and I'm not saying that because Major Brown is here. I would say it if he wasn't here. Most of the complaints that we have had, and that's primarily, I suppose, when I said we, I'm speaking of the basic areas of the inner city that I represent, policed by the City Police Department, and therefore this is where we have most of our experiences. And I would think that the recommendations that we have made are recommendations that some have been heeded to, such as the psychological testing. That was as a recommendation. We also recommended that they be given special training in the area of dealing with mental health people and people who are drug abusers, rather than just, you know, haphazardly going and treat them any kind of way. And we have even made recommendations as it relates to the training courses, that the people who are training them would put more emphasis on human relations, both for the white officers and black officers, and get a black person psychologist in order to offer the necessary hours of human relations at the training school. That was done at one time, and they got away from it. I think we need to do that. And also more training on, since it's their policy, once a weapon is pulled, use it, shoot to kill, that they have more training in the area of when actually to pull the weapon. And I do believe that some of those things and suggestions have been accepted, and they're going to implement some of them.
Major Brown, do you think that white officers feel intimidated when they enter black neighborhoods, that they become more nervous and are more apt to shoot first and ask questions later?
I think they do feel intimidated to a certain extent. That's why I think right now that we should be about the business of trying to promote the more interracial type of operations into the various communities, so that you can bring on and breed a better relationship and more respect for law enforcement. If you had a black and white riding in the units, in certain situations, it would help to ease the situation and bring on a better relationship in the communities, because you'll find basically in the black communities, you'll never see one unit that will ride up with one officer in it or one white officer in it. And it's a reason for it. They're human, and they're going to be scared. And the same situation exists in the white community as it relates to one of us riding up out there by ourselves. So we have a job on our hand as to educate the citizens of the community what we are there for, and then devote our energies to being there for that purpose and carrying it out to the best of our ability.
Reggie, what do you think is the biggest myth or misunderstanding that blacks have about police in general?
Well, two. One, Rob, when I was growing up, when I saw a police officer in my neighborhood, it meant run, brother, run. He was there for a specific purpose of apprehension or looking for someone. And since I've come to the department and began working, I've tried to change that image and project it to one that when you see one, it's a friend. Because before, as it relates to me growing up in the community opposed to a white growing up in a community, when they saw a police officer, it was a friend, a person that would show some kindness to help a person who needed some help. And we've tried to project that image through whatever I've done through the sheriff's office in the community to change that image. But a certain image of intimidation has been projected in the past, and it hasn't all been cleared up. It's going to take some time to do that.
You're saying there has been a history in the black community in the past, hasn't the white police officer in the past given black people the reason to intimidate them, to fear them?
Oh, certainly. In the past, there has been some intimidation done, and to what extent, I couldn't gauge it, but there has been some. And I think it has changed. Now, when I say the past, I mean when I was growing up as a youngster, there was some lines of intimidation, and, you know, we were scared of officers when we saw them. And when you saw one visiting in your community, you knew he was there for a purpose. He wasn't just there to protect the community in most instances. Now, it has changed somewhat. We've come, you know, a long ways. We just got a long ways to go to continue the process of educating and making the people of the community feel that law enforcement, when they appear in your community, are not there for intimidation purposes.
What are some of the things that, let's say, the sheriff's office here in Baton Rouge is doing to change that image?
Well, in most instances, when we implemented a patrol in the Eden Park area, a section of the city limits that had a heavy concentration of crime, we put officers out there to walk the beat, to be familiar with the citizens of the community, make them know you. We put officers out there who were permanently stationed in that particular community, and they worked the South Baton Rouge area also. And these officers, their duties and responsibilities related to them going out, meeting the citizens of the community, letting them know that we are there to serve you, we are there to help you, we are there when you need us. And they became friendly, and the community citizens knew who they were, knew them by name, and could call them and had no fear or problem when they had to call them. That's one way we're trying to project that image. We've gone through a series of other educational and drug-related programs that we would send officers out to sort of project an image to educate them in other areas and to present themselves in a manner where they would be accepted on any situation.
Joe, if you were the chief of police in Baton Rouge, what would you do any differently to improve relationships and improve service to the black community?
Well, first thing I would do is to use a different approach in policing in the black community. I would depend more on good law enforcement rather than depending upon criminals who are in the black community, who they depend upon in many instances to do the work for them. I mean by that there are many police informers who are habitual criminals who have been in trouble a number of times before. And unlike the sheriff's office, as Major Brown indicated, where they tried to establish a relationship and develop confidence in the department working with and through the community, most of the persons in the city police department who are working in the area of high crime areas seem to establish a relationship with the criminals in the community and try and get them to do their police work for them. And I think that's one thing I would change immediately. I would establish strong community ties so that we could do good law enforcement and have solid citizens cooperating with us rather than having to depend upon dope pushers and former armed robbers and people who have been involved and incarcerated on a number of occasions. So that's one of the first things I would do. The second thing I would do probably would be to bring more black officers into the black community. I think it's almost impossible to get police officers to be able to really merge and gel into a community who are not familiar with that community. don't know the environments, don't know the nature of the community, know how people think in that community. So I would either mix up the teams, have integrated teams, by any means I would get more black officers in there. And I would make certain that the training that these officers get wouldn't be just right out of the school and on into a car. I would put them with some of my top-notch officers, officers who have a proven record of being good officers. Let them be on the job training with those for a long length of time. Let them ride with them, let them work with them, let them learn how the job is done properly and correctly, not just send them out there with any rookie that might come around. I would keep a record of every complaint that came in on every officer, and I would use my common sense and judgment when I see, even though that we can't all of the time prove cases against an officer, if I get 10 complaints on one officer primarily for the same thing, something is wrong with that officer. That many citizens can't be wrong, and I would take disciplinary action against them.
If you ever decide to leave the state legislature, you may have something else lined up. Major Brown, let me ask you, do you feel there is a need for an ongoing dialogue between leaders of the black community and law enforcement officials?
I certainly do. I think there's a need for a dialogue between all segments of the community, black, white, and all other parts of the community, but specifically black, because the problems have existed there for quite some time. And let's just face it, that's where the crime is.
Do you think there is prejudice, let's say, among black officers towards white citizens?
No, I don't. Specifically because I think, and I'll try to use myself as an example, I've been in many situations where I may have thought that I should have been fearful, a little concerned. Take, for example, the floods that we're having here right now. I'm going and working into a largely white area where the floods areas affected the people the most, and it's in a predominantly white community. But I don't feel threatened, and I don't feel any black officers or deputies feel threatened whatsoever, nor intimidated.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but our time is up for today. And I would like to thank State Representative Joseph Delpit and Major Reginald Brown of the Sheriff's Department for being with us today. Next week on Folks, we'll have a musical treat for you featuring both jazz and blues.
And in 2 weeks, we'll meet 4 women who integrated the public school system in New Orleans almost 23 years ago. Until next time, so long.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.